Hey, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast presented by Underdog Fantasy. This is the Triple Play Fantasy Walkabout. This is Season 2, Episode 18. It's been a while. It's been a little bit of time since we were here. Now, if you are watching live, you might notice that my mate from around the world is not looking his normal self on your computer screen. We will deal with the Australian internet as it comes, but we are going to get through this episode one way or another. We are committed to that. I, of course, am your host. I am Thomas Simple FF. We have a little bit of cool news here. The Full Tilt Dynasty podcast Discord has been built. Okay, it is built and it is finished. It is not totally ready to be rolled out. We want to do something a little bit fun, and we are doing some testing, but it will be available for you. It will be a paid Discord service, and look, we will make it worth your while. Support is tremendously appreciated. It will allow us to not only continue creating this content, but it will allow us to expand in our content creation for you. Tons of exclusive stuff. It's a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun building it with all of you in mind. So there is that out of the way. And as I mentioned, I am, of course, your host of the Most Ominous Hands. I am Thomas Tipple, FF. And my fun fact of the day is I was up drinking until 2:30 this morning and decided it would be a good idea to go golfing at 7:15. And let me tell you, my driver was going way right.
And I am Tom Lee. You can find me at Tom_Lee92 on Twitter. Don't really have a fun fact. All I can say is that if it's not COVID, the real flu is still a thing. It sucks. And the Australian incident has not changed in the last 2 weeks.
Right. Obviously, Tom Lee missing last. We actually didn't even do a show at all last week. We couldn't make it work with everyone. Tom Lee went down with the flu. Look, you've beat COVID once. Now you've beat the flu. You're just an absolute machine with the illnesses. So we're happy you're back anyway. And as for the internet, look, you guys have listened to the show long enough. It's been almost 2 years. And sometimes Tom Lee's internet cuts out, but we always get through the episode one way or the other. And we're going to get through this one. What are we doing today, you might ask? Well, every cliche, every show has this cliche, and there is a lot to get to. Last time, Billy and I tried to crack this out in less than an hour and 20, and it was difficult, but we were going through each division, every team in their division, what actually happened, who had what targets, how did things break down for that team, and what do we expect moving on to next year. We're going to be doing this every week leading up to the kickoff. Now, you might be wondering, you're going to be short 2 teams. That's not fucking true. Tom Lee and I are going to be recording off air an episode, and we will be dropping it in the Discord for everyone to enjoy exclusively in that Discord. So that's going to be a great time. We can't wait for that. Look, and there's going to, like I said, lots of exclusive content that we're going to do in there. And look, it's not much. It's going to be the price you pay to go to Starbucks, right? And as we keep growing, the more and more we're going to be able to add. So I can't stress that enough. Get ready to hear the word Discord really thrown at you, because we love our community, the community that we've built. We love interacting with all of you. And guess what? We're all there with, again, tons of great features. But Tom Lee, after 2 weeks, are you ready to? I think we're ready to really get into this. I think I'm ready. I mean, the internet is working with us right now. We're doing good. Look, let's break down the first thing that we have on our docket today. And we're kicking this off pretty easy to finish off the AFC North, which, by the way, that's the division we're doing. We're finishing off the AFC North. Shits me to tears. You have one here already.
It's a classic.
In your time, in the time off, you have apparently been bothered, and you have Twitter videos of isolated contextless QB passes and wide receiver routes in OTAs. Why does this bother you so much?
Well, heading to the draft, everyone says, I'm not a film analyst. I'm not going to overblow anything. I don't know how to diagnose and look at all of these college games and full context footage. But we'll take a clip from an OTA where a player slips at the top of his route, or a QB slightly underthrows someone not in a game context, not wearing pads, and we go, oh, they're shit. Let's drop their fantasy dynasty value because of one clip that we took out of a practice that one of us saw once, and it just goes viral. And with all this extra time I've had, I've clearly been on Twitter a little too much, and it's just mind-boggling. Like, why do we do it? Is it just because we're bored and 3 months out from the season? It's like, well, we need to talk about something, so people are just trolling through all this footage. I don't know, but it definitely gets the shits to tears going because mainly because a few of them I actually like as players, which never helps. But what are your thoughts? Have you seen the same sort of thing? Because we like clipping footage. We like having a look into the game a little more in depth. But I don't understand where this whole concept of taking the worst of, one practice comes from.
Obviously, I think it is utterly hilarious that the Miami Dolphins Twitter account is quite clearly trolling everyone. Like, they hear everything, they see everything on the internet, and they just post. One of the first videos they post is Tyreek Hill underthrowing, or Tua underthrowing Tyreek Hill on like this wobbly pass, and everyone loses their shit about it. I obviously quote tweeted it because come on, you got to get the views, right? But
yeah,
it is silly, and we always say the same things all the time. Unless it defends our narrative, fade the coach speak, the highlight reel. And you know why? To your point, we're up to the draft. We say, hey, I'm not a film expert. I don't know. It's because there's no data in OTAs, right? There's no new data coming out in OTAs. Not really. So there's no PFF grades. Yeah. Right. There's no PFF grades. There's no targets per route run at practice. But I think that's where a lot of it comes from. And how many months are we into the offseason now? Like, I think most of the rookie content has been put out already. That's why we've moved on. Most of the debates have been had, even though apparently we're still arguing Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard on the internet. Can't believe that. Gabe Davis is now potentially a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Gotta love that.
I saw that, yeah.
Just going up without doing anything. Gotta love that. A lot of this stuff, man, you just have to enjoy it. I don't think I'd take any of it into account. The things that I do take into account are things like Dearness Johnson signing a new contract. That I want, which he did. He did get a contract today, a 1-year deal. Is Kareem Hunt leaving? Maybe he is. That'll ruffle some things up. That's what you pay attention. Yeah, that's what you pay attention to. Yeah. I don't. What undrafted free agent is getting a shot? That's what I want to know. I don't care that we talked about this with the Full Tilt Dynasty pod on Tuesday. Billy, Jacob, and I, we don't care that Treylon Burks is sucking wind at practice. We don't care that Lamar Jackson's not at OTAs. We don't give a shit, and you shouldn't either. It's fun to talk about on the internet with your friends and in your fantasy leagues, and you should be using all of this to get trades done if it's in your favor. Absolutely, because Tom Lee and I always tell you to lie. Absolutely fucking lie. But don't panic and relax. So, I think that's all I got for the rest of that. Why don't you?
It's meant to be a bit of fun, right? Like, it's not a real shit to tears. I'm not losing my mind out here, but it's just like, what are we doing? We do this every time, over and over and over again. And it's just
definitely.
It's like,
I definitely lose my shit. So, all right, let's look at the next bit here. Why don't you remind everybody why we refer to this the way it is?
Right. So I can't remember if it was last time I was on or not, because, the flu does weird things to the head. But the phrase "so hungry we'd eat the crotch out of a low-flying duck" was mentioned, right? An Australian saying. Yes. And the whole idea is that you're a bit delirious, you're starving. So if anything close to food happens to walk past, you're interested in having a piece of it. What I'm doing with this, and we like to take Australian sayings and slant them into segments and that sort of thing. What I'm trying to do here is a player that you always sort of come back to going, I wonder what the value of this guy is, even though you probably shouldn't, or you're a bit delirious as to why you're doing it, right? So my example for this week of our low-flying duck crutch, for me, is sadly CEH, because you keep hearing more and more rhetoric about how his value is dropping, in the same way as his value is low. We know this, right? He's pretty much nothing anymore. But to lose value actively when nothing's happening in the off-season is kind of interesting to me, and it sort of gets me going, well, I wonder if it is dropping, I wonder if I can get him for, a third or something silly out there just to see, just to roll the dice if there's anything left. Because he's still young enough, and they didn't really add a first or a second rounder. Who knows? They've lost pass catches in that offense. Yes, they drafted some more. This whole thing could look different. So for me, he is someone I keep coming back to going, why the hell am I doing this? Not paying necessarily up for him, but just keep asking that question over and over again, because it's just those people that sort of fade into the abyss. And come season time, we know with running backs, there's always going to be injuries. There's always going to be opportunities. Where's he at?
Yeah. All right. I like that. And the player you have selected here is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's talk about that. What about CH does it?
What about CH does it? Well, yeah, like I said, so with Kansas City, they've dropped a lot of pass catching with Tyreek Hill leaving the offseason. So where those targets go with rookies coming in primarily and not really an established veteran apart from Juju, there's an opportunity for pass catching. We haven't seen it. They didn't really draft a running back of note that's definitely going to go and take those snaps away. So, he played a little bit while he was there. What price could you pay that you're happy to take a rolling sort of shot at with a running back of CEH's caliber? Is the name still going to hold the value high for those people who have him? And are they holding on hope, or are they just going to get rid of him? That for me it doesn't have to be logical while you're asking the question. In my head, I'm going, is there an opportunity? And it's just one of those ones that you're testing.
I think this got touched on really well, because the players that always were beneficial in fantasy in Kansas City were the pass catchers. And they've always had these bottom of the barrel type pass catchers. Le'Veon Bell came in. Damian Williams was there. Darrell Williams is now gone. He's over there in Arizona. And now Clyde is kind of the only one left to actually catch passes. And you've already seen the reports of, he hasn't been healthy yet. He had surgery and he got sick and he is this and is that. This is his first off season and all this stuff. Okay. I think it's fair to hold on hope, because the people that did draft him probably drafted him in the top 3 of rookie drafts. Of course you're holding on hope. Am I going anywhere near? Yeah, absolutely not. Because it's still cheaper to draft Ronald Jones and Pacheco, right? If Pacheco makes the roster, that's definitely the guy I want to roster, because he's a faster, more explosive pass catching specialist, which is what Jerick McKinnon was a team saver last year when he was out there catching passes and toting the rock. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is simply not explosive. And I think we've seen him enough for that. His runs of 20 or more yards is abysmal, and he's not an effective runner. So I don't want any part of him. I don't blame people for wanting to. I think it's worth his cost if you're really committed to not having another running back, because he'll have games where he scores touchdowns. He will. And some games he'll actually produce. But, popping in your lineup is absolutely terrifying. Again, I would much just rather roster Ronald Jones and Pacheco.
And I think that's meant to be the fun of this segment, right? Is that it's not necessarily a logical thing. It's just something that your head keeps coming back to from a process point of view that you can't really explain. It doesn't necessarily, like you said, Pacheco is the clear value guy to go and add. But you're going, what if he does do something? Could you get him at a cost that, is appropriate? So there's always these guys floating around the back of our heads. We know we shouldn't go and take the cookie jar. But for me, it's always just ask the question in the back of the head. If you've got it there, may as well go and ask the question and check on where he's at.
Yeah, and for me, if I were to pick a player like that, it's Conk Daddy. It's Conklin, because he's a free tight end. And we like free tight ends. And since you've been gone, I've been arguing tight ends for seemingly nonstop about even my perception of tight ends, even though you hate them. They're basically kickers to you, which is fine. But for me, I still don't want to pay for any of them outside of the top 5 or 6. And even still,
that's what it comes down to, right?
Iffy.
I think we all agree on that. That's where it comes from. And that's where it started.
But Conklin,
Conklin's interesting.
But Conklin goes to a team where he only has to worry about near 30, coming off injury tight end. And he was productive with Minnesota last year. And early camp reports, you want to hear the camp reports of a player doing well. Okay, at least that means he's doing enough to get noticed in that position group. Conklin has had that come out. It is happening. Maybe he's a thing, but he's free, and I like free. Free is good. Of course, I was tricked last year with the whole Tyler Kroft scenario where Tyler Kroft was popping off in the preseason and blah, 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 blah. I added him to almost every single one of my rosters and had to drop him like immediately because he was, in fact, not it. So,
but the key, Tom, is what did it cost you?
Nothing. That's the best part. We love free because if it works for geniuses, if it doesn't, we blame everyone else. Look, going through the teams is going to be quite a bit of work. This is true. However, we are going to come back. We are going to punish a Tully. We haven't done it in a while. Mini trade game. We know you love the trade game. We're going to do the mini trade game. We're going to get into it. It's going to be a great time. After that, we are going to break down the teams and finish off the AFC North. So sit tight. Here is a clip of cash considerations from when Jacob and I did it. The first cash considerations. We should be back with that next week. We're going to find out. But this is the Underdog/DFS show. Hope you enjoy. Have a listen. We got sniped pretty hard. If you haven't heard this before, it's a good one.
And also, like, I would rather just get those different textures when on the odd occasion. Wow. Who is Ned Saris? Oh, is he aware that Cooper doesn't even play for the Cowboys anymore? Wow, that was rude.
Bro.
Okay, well, what are we gonna do here?
Shit. It's rough when you have a plan and just one person for no reason absolutely tanks and nosedives it. And that's what happens. And that's the beauty of playing at Underdog, which, by the way, the puppy is out, right? You have Best Ball Mania 3, multiple ways to play, and it's really easy to do. You just go to Underdog Fantasy. You can go to the website, or you can go to the App Store, get the app, sign on, and end up having a great time on Underdog Fantasy drafting Best Ball. And, of course, you can play Pick'em, NBA. There's so many things that you can do. NBA, golf, hockey playoffs. Underdog helps you get the most out of your sports watching experience, and you need to join the online sensation while you can. And if you use promo code Full Tilt, your first time deposit, they'll match you up to $100. That is, I'm going to try to do math, but it should be 20 free entries to the puppy. And of course, it is 4 free entries to Best Ball Mania 3. So why wouldn't you want to do that? That's free times to play. All right, let's get that. All right, Tom Lee, let's punish a Tully. Hit me with the mini trade game. Give the people what they want, what they've been missing, what they need, because it's been too long for the trade game.
Yeah, so, and again, if you're only recently joining us, punishing a Tully is a tall beer, light-hearted conversation, the things you shoot the shit with your mates about. So mini trade game today, I thought I'd just pull up a few ones that they're not necessarily pulled from any recent conversations that we've had, but I've seen a few of these names floating around on Twitter in my time off. So first one for us, 23 first, and we're going to say it's random, so we always say it's around middle to late. And
yeah, anyone active
or
anyone anyone that's actively telling you that they can predict where picks are going to fall or they're fucking liars. Which good for them. They should be lying, right? Like we can't say one thing and not want the other.
No. But the old, this is going to be, such and such. Yeah. None of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So,
Right,
23 first and Breece Hall or the stud that is Jonathan Taylor. Yep. Did you get that?
Yeah. I really got to think about it. 23 first, Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor. It's the 23 first and Breece Hall for me. I think it is because is it 2 firsts for Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah.
A random. Actually, nah, I'm changing my answer. I want Jonathan Taylor there. There's one running back I would take right in the top 8 of a dynasty startup. Probably in the top 3 rounds of a dynasty startup. There's one running back I'm taking, and it is Jonathan Taylor. And after the 5 top tier quarterbacks, Kyle Pitts, Chase, and Jefferson, is Jonathan Taylor. So yeah. So it's the 23-1 in Breece. For me, my instant reaction is pick and running back, but I don't think Taylor's production is actually replaceable. If you're going to come at me with the Nyheim Hines shit, stop it. Stop it.
That whole narrative. Yeah.
I don't care. Do not care. We do not care. But that's mine. What about you?
Yes, I mean, this one is pulled straight from Twitter. Our close friend and co-worker, Jacob Sanderson, was having a few conversations with people, and we know huge Colts fan, huge JT fan, huge run the ball fan, hence the title of his name. He's heavily to the JT side. Our process, or my process, suggests that the replaceable production and the pick is the value side. For me, I'm still JT because of the unknown value of the 23 first. It's still a good thing. But we haven't seen Breece Hall play yet. He could be fantastic, but he also could be very much one of those middling running backs that's, whilst young, is not anywhere near the caliber of what a game-changing player in JT could do. So I'll stay with you on this one, but it's one of those questions I think that'll get asked a fair bit throughout the season. What would you jump off the game winner for when it comes to low replaceable production and value? Okay,
I dig that. Next. We're going to try to get through these quick so we can break these teams.
Yeah, just punching with little takes. Yeah, so 103 and 108 or Trey Lance?
I'm taking Trey because 103, you're like getting Wilson or London, and those players might be great. 108, you're getting what, a JMO, maybe a Sky Moore, or a quarterback at San Francisco when he gets the reins has 101 potential. And if you don't think he does, just go look at what Jalen Hurts has been able to do. Go look at what Lamar Jackson has been able to do. And he's in a great system with phenomenal offensive players. Trey Lance does have the chance, and I'm not willing to move Trey Lance, especially at where his ADP is right now, for those 2 draft picks. I'm just not willing to do that.
And I think that's the key. It's different to saying like a JT where we know what the established value is. Trey Lance's range of outcomes is still more than those picks are worth for me. So it's still the established quarterback. But this is a trade that actually did go down the DLF Trade Finder. And it sort of prompted me to think, okay, well, what sort of other first would change it for me? If I slid the 108 up to a 105, would that change it? And I'm probably still the same. I'd probably still say no for now. But it's just an interesting thought project. Again, it's the off season. It's a long time. A lot of these things are going to pop up. So start thinking your way through, is there value to be had if I move on or off of these players? And what would I do with them? Yeah.
Or you're just leaving yourself just shorthanded at quarterback because you're not drafting. Normally in a trade like this, it's because at 103, there's some other stud quarterback you could draft. You're not doing this deal, drafting London and Wilson and then taking Pickett. Like, you're not doing, and if you are doing that, stop it. Next.
So next for us, so straight up, CeeDee Lamb or CMC?
CeeDee Lamb for me. I think that's pretty easy. Pretty easily CeeDee Lamb for me because you're asking wide receiver and running back. And if 2 players, CeeDee Lamb's going in the 2nd round, and I've seen Christian McCaffrey fall as late as the early 3rd in startups. That's easy money for me. And I want to buy the dip in Christian McCaffrey. If there is a dip, I do 100% because I'm a sucker for that guy. However, I can't do it at the sake of CeeDee Lamb. I can't do that. Other receivers, AJ Brown. Yeah. All right, now maybe I'm looking at Christian. Actually, you have AJ Brown here. We're gonna talk about him next. All right, AJ Brown, Christian McCaffrey. Okay, it's still AJ Brown, but it's like a little closer. Then you start moving down the list a little bit, and you'll find that guy. But CeeDee Lamb is not the guy I would move straight up for McCaffrey, and I don't think you should do that.
And I think especially without team context here, right?
It doesn't matter, but I'll put team context. It doesn't matter how good your wide receiver room. You should not do this. Oh, I have 5 receivers. I don't think that matters because you're going to want CeeDee Lamb if, in fact, the wheels have fallen off in Christian McCaffrey, right? Like when he plays, the man is dynamite, but I would kind of rather have CeeDee Lamb at this point in both of their careers. Even team context. And CeeDee Lamb hasn't been the GOAT we were hoping that he would be, right? He's been fine. Yeah. But I mean, 3rd-year breakout wide receivers, it's a thing. I mean, I'm willing to bet on the age, the position, the team, the situations. I'm willing to bet on that for sure.
Yeah, spot on. I'm with you. So the only reason I brought up team context was that if you're tempted to make this move, go look at the cheaper running backs because the replaceable production is on the running back side, not necessarily the value of the wide receiver side. That's why it's CeeDee Lamb for me. There's far more cheaper, replaceable, usable running back options that are cheaper than CMC for me.
Well, look, and we're not sitting here saying that Christian McCaffrey is a replaceable asset when he is healthy and when he is doing his stuff. That's not a thing. But running backs are replaceable. You can get
Yes.
I would rather have CeeDee Lamb and Leonard Fournette, let's say, than Christian McCaffrey and I don't know Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Perfect.
Like,
yeah.
So I would much prefer that. What's next?
So the last one for us. So you mentioned AJ Brown before, and it's just because a little bit of sort of, I guess, unsurety when it comes to his value and his spot in this Eagles lineup. But 104 and 107, or AJ Brown is our last one.
For me, I'm going with the picks because you can draft AJ Brown's replacement and another wide receiver. I love AJ Brown, but he was never my dynasty wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I am off of AJ Brown, not necessarily just because of the trade, but I just have been off of AJ Brown at that evaluation. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking the picks because I feel like you can draft his replacement on the team he played on, which may or may not be a good thing, and you can end up with a Sky Moore, a JMO, a Dotson, whoever else tickles your fancy. You're getting 2 shots at wide receiver to replace his production. I would definitely do that because, yes, AJ Brown has the contract, but health, the team, the situation, the targets.
It's a lot of factors.
I like AJ Brown, but he's a player that I would definitely move for those 2 picks.
Yeah, and I'm just the picks. It's a lot closer for me. My evaluation of AJ Brown hasn't moved yet, really, because I just want to wait and see a little bit. But you're right.
Because you're smart and reasonable.
Yeah, but also, that means you're going to miss out on some value. Maybe there is some value to be had here. If you're probably you want to take these shots, by all means, have the balls, call the shots. So put your budgie smugglers on as it was and go and try and take the shots. But it's just the picks for me, just for the same reasons you said. Wide receiver, you get the same positional replacement, which is why it's different to a Trey Lance. And you can pick up another piece as well. So fun little trade game to float through just as a thought project. But now we're going to get into the real stuff.
Yes, and we will do that right when we come back. So sit tight. You're not going to want to miss this. And look, we've cut through a half hour of this already. Getting through these team breakdowns in like 40 minutes is going to be absolutely tough. Maybe it goes a little longer. It's been 2 weeks. Who knows? The people need what they need. But we are going to be right back. So sit tight. When we come back, we are getting into the rest of the AFC North. Sit tight, guys.
I just think Brian Robinson's ceiling is like TJ Yeldon. And even if he's more likely to be a thing in that capacity than Zamir White is to be a thing in sort of like an Alex Collins, short-lived, flame out type fantasy production role, I don't know that Brian Robinson at his TJ Yeldon peak is worth anything. Like, do I ever want that in my lineup?
Look, that was our episode with Noah Hills or Noah Moore Parties on the Bird app. The man is the running back whisperer. And I'm not saying, but I'm just going to say, we mentioned that he's the RB whisperer, and now he's being referred to as the RB whisperer. We have Austin Gale on the show, and all of a sudden he gets a promotion. And I shout out to Austin Gale, formerly of PFF and Tailgate, for his next ventures. And of course, Josh Larkey is on our show, and the next thing you know, he's going off and getting promoted at FTN, which bodes well for our next guest, by the way, which is Tuesday. We have JJ Zacharyson on the show, and who knows, maybe a month after being on our show, he might be running an NFL organization, because the man is an absolute stud, and I mean, definitely one of the smartest people I've ever listened to. So we're happy, excited. I'm nervous about that already, but I'm going to not think about that. We're going to move on and do this other thing. And look, I'm going to say this again because I feel like it's important. The Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Discord will be promoted. It will be available to people to purchase their subscriptions and get in and come and join us and talk through it. That is in the works. It's on the way. It's coming. It's happening. It's built and ready. We're just in testing. So do not worry. Sit tight. Look, when we did this, me and Billy, when you were ill, you were just away. You weren't even ill yet, but we did the Ravens and Steelers. Today we are doing I decided to do the Ravens early because, look, I was going to talk about them until I was going to find a way to talk about them in every episode unless we just did them right away. So I just did them right away and it was fine and good. And we actually learned something. There are 170 targets vacated in Baltimore, and neither Billy or myself could figure out what the hell they're going to do with those what? It's the weirdest thing, and it took us going through and really looking at it. So that's what this exercise is. That is what it's about. So who do you want to start with? You want to start with Bengals? Do you want to start with Browns?
Let's start Bengals. I think Bengals are going to be the more straightforward one just because there's been less disruption in their offseason. But it's still going to be a very interesting dive in because these guys are highly valued and therefore it comes with a lot of cost. So we want to look at where this is all at.
And I just want to mention, can we stop drafting Joe Burrow ahead of Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts and just quarterbacks that can run?
Yeah.
Can we just do that, please? Anyway, look, they play in the AFC North. Obviously, they're 10-7 last year. They were 7th in points scored, tied for with 460, but they allowed quite a bit, 376. Look, overall, they're the 7th best team according to PFF. Their offense, which is what we really give a shit about, was 8th overall according to Pro Football Focus. And what did the Cincinnati Bengals go and do? I believe the Cincinnati Bengals free agent haul is way more important than their draft class, so I wanted to highlight that. They get Alex Kappa of Tampa Bay on a 4-year, $35 million contract. Huge.
Massive.
They lose CJ Uzama. We talked about him. He went to the Jets. They signed La'el Collins from Dallas, 3 years, $21 million. What else are they going to do? Oh, they're going to go and get Ted Karras. He was from New England to be their new starting center. They basically bought an offensive line, 3 great, very good players on fantastic contracts. Unbelievable. So that helps them. Then we go in and we look at you have the same sheet in front of you when we're looking at the statistics. I just want to ask before I get into who did what stood out to you the most?
Well, I mean, it didn't stand out, but what we observed last year was that Burrow was off to a very average start and finished hot, and it led them all the way to a Super Bowl. So his numbers were never going to look amazing overall, and I think that's why people have pushed the value up so high, is they've just taken that last little bit and projected it out to the moon. But I think what stood out for me is just how, again, and I know this sounds stupid, how good Jamar Chase was. Just outstanding. You just look through all of the stat lines, and it's like this guy just gets it done everywhere. You could have had anyone sitting at quarterback, and you probably still would have had a hell of a good season, let alone someone with the accuracy of a Burrow. But for me, it was just a standout of shit, that's right. Jamar Chase is a dominant piece and will continue to be for a long period of time.
Look, I agree. But as you say, Jamar Chase was so good. I actually think for me, what stood out the most was T. Higgins.
Yep.
As we're going to get into, T. Higgins kind of outplayed Jamar Chase, especially when you look at his expected points. And
I'm not going to say that I left you T. Higgins to say, but yeah, sure.
That's what you'll say.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
But let's get into what happened with the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's a little more numbery than we usually have on this show, but we feel like it's important to fully understand what happened with the Bengals. Look, they targeted the receivers 359 times. That's 66.5%. So that's where the ball was going. They did target the running backs 98 times. It's 18.1%. And the lowly tight ends, I know everyone has hopes for Hayden Hurst. We're going to talk about the tight ends, but a measly 15.4% of the time for tight ends. So that's not fantastic for your team. But let's talk about Joe Burrow first, Tom Lee.
Yep.
520 passing attempts. That's 32.5 per game. However, the end of the season, when he had those blow-up games against the Ravens and they left him in, they didn't pull him, nothing like that.
Yep.
So there's definitely some skewage happening here for Joe Burrow. 4,600 passing yards, 288 per game, good for 6th in the NFL. He did huck it deep. He was 12th in the league throwing the ball deep, 65 times. He threw 60 red zone attempts, 60. That's only 17th in the league. He's big-time baller. We obviously know all the nicknames, the fashion, everything like that. He is he plays like it. He had 36 money throws, and we always love seeing fewer danger plays than he had money throws. Danger plays are plays that could be intercepted, cause turnovers, whatever. He was 26 in the league with 23 of them. He threw, and of those danger plays, 21 of them were interceptable passes. You might think 21 is a lot, but he was 24th in the league in interceptable passes. So he's obviously not turning the ball over. 34 passing touchdowns. That's a 6.5% rate. That's good for 8th. He had the number 1 yards per attempt in the NFL at 8.9. That's obviously phenomenal. He was 4th in accuracy rating. He was plus 190 in his EPA, good for 2nd. He had the 2nd best true passer rating. Fantasy points per game was good for 10th. He performed better than he was expected. He was expected at 19.7, so that's not a lot, but that's enough. And obviously his Pro Football Focus passing grade 91.2. Obviously, phenomenal season. This was a phenomenal season. However, he was still only 10th in fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
At 20.5. So let's take that. He had 34 touchdowns and was only 10th in fantasy points per game. Do we think he throws 34 passing touchdowns again next season? Maybe. That rate is really high. The passing touchdown rate is really high. That's really hard to replicate, and only certain quarterback. Lamar Jackson's 36 touchdown pass season, that came down. Say what you want about Lamar Jackson. I don't really give a shit. Even Aaron Rodgers doesn't always replicate this kind of success.
No.
And with Joe Mixon, we're going to talk about Joe Mixon in a minute, coming in with a career high in touchdowns and touches and everything else. And the Bengals turning to the run game sometimes, even when we want to bang our head against the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know if Joe Burrow flashes that number 1, even number 5 upside that I want. If you're going to draft, that's why I'm saying you shouldn't be drafting a guy like Joe Burrow ahead of Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, even Justin Herbert, who runs. Obviously, you're not drafting him in front of Josh Allen. And I know some people are starting to say, well, I would rather have Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes. You shouldn't. You shouldn't want that because Patrick Mahomes runs and Joe Burrow just, not that he can't, he just doesn't really do it. So obviously the fantasy value, Kirk Cousins struggles to be a top 12. I think Joe Burrow, his best case scenario is that he's Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins has been very decent for fantasy, but I think his upside is capped. So I'll ask you this before we move on to Joe Mixon. Is this what you expect from Joe Burrow, or is this kind of like maybe he has a top 5 season? I'll round the question because Billy gave me shit for asking him like 7 questions at once.
All right.
I can't help it. I want to know everything, Tom Lee.
Yep.
Joe Burrow, is 2021 just what you're going to get from Joe Burrow in the foreseeable future? Or do you think he has that upper tier elite Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady upside over the next couple of years, especially with how rushing quarterbacks work?
So for me, there's two sort of movable pieces when it comes to Joe Burrow, and this is why I think I can understand why people are trying to push him up so high, because one of the narratives leads you that way, and the other one for me is never to drop him. I think he does belong in the top 10 because I think his offense around him is good enough and he's accurate enough to make this happen. Like you said, Kirk Cousins is a very accurate passer. He had good pieces around him in sort of your Cooks, Thielens, and now Jefferson, so he can produce well. Plus, I think there's just a bit of swagger where Burrow's the guy who wants to stand in, and if they are at all looking like they're going to be down, throw that ball deep and hit those high upside games. So he could have a few boom games that push him up past the Cousins. But I'm hoping his floor rises to the Cousins. So if it's floor to ceiling, I'm happy with him being in that sort of 8 to 12 range as far as dynasty quarterbacks go. But the other piece for me that is movable is their additions at the offensive line. So we're going to talk about Joe Mixon in a second, but it goes one of two ways. If you think that his danger plays being poor were high because he was at a high pressure rate because their O-line was poor, you could in theory say that there'll be less of those, therefore more efficiency, which is hard to say based on these stats, but that could push him up. Or the better O-line leads to more production and more reliability from a Mixon, and therefore his value goes up. So depending on what you think they're going to do offensively from a scheme point of view, you could say one of these two pieces, but arguably not both, will increase in value or will stay about the same. So I'm happy to say this is what we can hope to expect consistently from him, because I'm with you and I think you're the same, where we sort of think the upgrades at O-line are going to make it a little more reliable. They don't want to necessarily put him in the position to throw 40 times a game. They want to make sure that they start winning games reliably, especially when it gets cold against a competitive division. So for me, it's going to be more we'll run the damn ball, and we're going to trust Burrow to get it done when we need to.
Well, let's talk about Joe Mixon, as you say, run the damn ball. He obviously had a career high in carries, 292. Right, he was third in the NFL, and sometimes they really did lean on him. He had 48 targets though, so that's not bad at all. 48 targets for a wide receiver or for a running back is pretty good. We'd like to see it up in the 60s and 70s, but this is what it is. Obviously, again, there was only 98 targets to running backs to begin with, and they love P. Ryan for some reason because their coach is fake sharp, and we know this. He had 314 receiving yards. Right, he had 1,205 rushing yards. He had a 9.4% target share. We like that. Fantasy points per game, he was 5th. And his expected fantasy points per game, he was 20.9. So he finished below expected. Pro Football Focus rushing grade of 82.4, his receiving grade is 64.1 with an overall Pro Football Focus grade of 79.5. He did not have a fantastic juke rate, 22.8%. Little bit concerning. However, he still evaded tackles. He was 7th with 76 evaded tackles. He created 2.3 yards per touch. Now, two stats that really stand out to me when looking at this. Not only was his red line touches or his red zone touches were 50 with 13 goal line touches. It's good for 5th in the NFL. He lined up out wide 61 snaps, and he lined up in the slot 36 snaps. That's 7.5% for the slot and 12.7% out wide. That's pretty good.
That's pretty
good. They didn't target him enough when he was out there, but I think that's pretty good. What stands out to you about Joe Mixon, and is he a clear time to get rid of him? I know some people are buying into Joe Mixon can be the RB1 next year. Look at his production. This is the first year he really was healthy for the majority of the season. The most touches he's ever had in his career. Was definitely helped out by the touchdowns. And his coach is fake sharp. Joe Mixon, buying or selling for 2022?
Can I hold? I think with what I think is going to happen, with the O-line becoming a little bit better, therefore he doesn't have to create as much in space, because we know running backs get older. You want to rely less and less on them to juke and to do explosive things in space, but to still be very functional in that capacity, which I think he is. He lines up in good positions. I think more time in the pocket, more mature Burrow, there'll be more check down. So I think he'll get a little boost from the receiving game. But as I said, their touchdowns are more likely to become a little more modest and become a little more even. So you take the upside away from the touchdown side of things, you get the predictability up. His yards per carry were 4.1, which is low, right? It's not amazing. 42nd in the whole NFL. And I think that's got a fair bit to do with the O-line and creating yards. I think this offense has a fair bit of room to grow in its capacity to become more reliable, more consistent. But like I said, they're also playing a very good defensive division, right? It's going to be very competitive. They're going to need to run the ball. He's going to face stack boxes sometimes. It's just going to be one of those things that I think the factors from both ends of his upside and downside should level him out to a nice RB1. So if you have him, you're excited. But I'm not going out of my way to say this is the guy that's going to become the number one, just based on I think it's going to sort of level out towards the median as opposed to go to the moon.
Okay, I can. You know what? I can get down with that. I can get down with that for sure. Let's talk about the wide receivers, Tom Lee, because obviously the wide receivers are, they're the bee's knees. It's what the kids love, and it's what we talked about. The similarities between T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And what about Tyler Boyd? We don't give a fuck about Tyler Boyd. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are what we care about. Receptions, 80. I'm going to do this. The first number is going to be Jamar Chase, and the second number is going to be T. Higgins. Yep. I think it's important to go through this and just how different it was. 81 receptions for Jamar Chase, 74 receptions T. Higgins. 1,455 yards, good for 4th for Jamar Chase. 1,091, good for 15th for T. Higgins. You like that. But their target share is 23.7 compared to T. Higgins' 23.9%. Deep targets sets them apart. 30 for Jamar Chase, only 17 for T. Higgins. The red zone, 12 for Jamar Chase, 13 for T. Higgins. Yards after catch, 550 for Jamar Chase, which is insane. 310 for T. Higgins. Total touchdowns, 13 for Jamar Chase, only 6 for T. Higgins. Now that number is very interesting to me. Their yards per route run, yards per route run, 2.7 for Jamar Chase, 2.4 for T. Higgins. That's very interesting. Out wide, Jamar Chase had 637 snaps, good for 80.9%. T. Higgins, basically the same, 532 for 78.7%. Fantasy points per game. And this is what really separates them by almost 2 points. It's insane. And it's touchdowns and the receiving yards. 17.9 points per game, good for 5th by Jamar Chase. 15.7%. Oh my God, 15.7 points per game for T. Higgins. That's good for 12th. However, the expected fantasy points for Jamar Chase is 16.5. They flip, is 16.5. That's good for 12th on the expected. T. Higgins expected 18.2, good for 7th. It is insane how similar T. Higgins, Jamar Chase were last season. Jamar Chase, the consensus, I guess maybe not even consensus, potential number 1 receiver in Dynasty. And people are arguing if T. Higgins should even be a top 10 or top 12. I don't know how you look at what Burrow did and how similar T. Higgins and Jamar Chase were. Even their PFF grades are almost similar. Jamar Chase, 86.1%, or not percent, 86.1 grade on PFF, 82.8 grade for T. Higgins on Pro Football Focus in the receiving grade. Unbelievably close. Obviously, Jamar Chase is the guy, but at this point, Tom Lee, are you just, and maybe I'm insane, but I'm comfortable moving Jamar Chase for T. Higgins and whatever else in that haul that I can get. Because T. Higgins, to me, when I'm looking at it, there's no way he's not a top 8 receiver in Dynasty. Age, size, speed, everything. He fits that bill. I feel like T. Higgins is what we wanted A.J. Brown to be. And maybe I'm going to get roasted for that comment, but that's just how I feel.
It's the comment that's hard because people have this special relationship with the Jamar Chase shares, and they should. But if you look at these numbers, I think the main takeaway is that both of these players are extremely good, and they should both be there for the long run in the top 12 as far as wide receivers go. So if you have either or you want either, I'm backing you to say it's still a good decision, right? None of this, T. Higgins should be down in the 15s, 18s. No, get that bullshit out your mouth, because from what we're seeing here, the man's going to be a very, very excellent wide receiver for a fair period of time. The only difference really for me is that you look at the production after the catch, the deep balls, Jamar Chase is just a little more special. And of course, we love the special players, and they come at a price premium, and they're harder to achieve. So it's not necessarily that I'd trade away Chase to pick up Higgins and someone else. It'd be more so that I'd go after T. Higgins as an asset on his own right. Because I think you can get, it's like getting Jamar Chase light. You're getting all of the same team scheme production, flippable stats, but not at the special price you'd have to pay out for a Jamar Chase. So I don't know whether I would put my balls out on the line and go into the Twitterverse and say trade away Jamar Chase for T. Higgins plus. But I definitely say go and trade for T. Higgins because, from what we're seeing here, you've got yourself a very extremely good player that won't necessarily come at the same price and hemorrhaging of assets that Jamar Chase will. But it's super exciting to see these stats line up like this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of trippy. Now the important thing is what are you expect? Obviously, the big games by Jamar Chase is what made him the GOAT for the rookie season. He had again 2 games against Baltimore, and he had some other good games too. But I'm still bitter about the Baltimore game, so I'm going to keep bringing them up. That
I'm going to bring it up once the show.
Point games. It's like 45, 50-point games. Yeah. But the rest of the season, he had his ups and downs. Do you expect a step forward? It'd be kind of hard to have a step forward. He was 5th in points per game this year, but he was expected to come down. I think maybe you get another top 5 season of Jamar Chase next year. I think that's possible in the range of outcomes, but I think the touchdowns kind of balance out next year for me personally. Yeah. How do you feel about where the offense is? We talked about Joe Mixon. Do we think Joe Burrow is going to repeat? Now, how does this ripple effect down to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase? And we'll even add Tyler Boyd. We can't shit on him for no reason.
No, he's very serviceable. And if any of the boys missed, then as it generally was, it was sort of picked up by the Tyler Boyds and by the tight end in the games if they missed any through the wide receiver. But Jamar Chase he's got that sort of vibe of, he's going to be your wide receiver 1 for a long period of time in the same way that Tyreek Hill has sort of dominated it for the last few years. if any change, I sort of see it happening like we did with Tyreek Hill the last 2 seasons, which is maybe just becoming a little more consistent across some games, depending on how the offense goes. He'll still have those boom games in there, but if he can lift his floor consistently across the board, he's going to be like, the standout. But if he keeps exactly the same, I think, you're never going to complain about a season like we just had. So it's not that I think he's going to get more efficient. It's not that I think he's going to get more talented or more opportunities or anything really. I think if the touchdowns come down, I think he'll find a way to replace that production somewhere across the board. But yeah, I think the key is that T. Higgins should be either exactly the same or, like we saw with his expected fantasy points per game, he's got room to grow in this offense. And those touchdowns, I think, will be the same as a total for the team. I just don't think it's going to be the same necessarily for Burrow. So I think we're going to see a very similar production profile across the whole board from this Bengals outfit, if not a little more efficient, a little more consistent, which is good for those who already have them. It makes it harder to buy if you've got a very reliable asset, though, mid-season. So if you're going to go and get them, I'd be getting them in the preseason rather than waiting for in-season, because you're going to get the rhetoric of these guys are all top 6. You're going to have to pay top 6 prices, even if they don't necessarily match that production.
Nope, I completely agree. And I'm just willing to bet that balances out a little bit more. Of course, we're arguing 2 of the best players at the position. You want them both. We're not saying don't go and get
the whole
them.
offense should still be good, right? Like, this is
just avoid Tyler Boyd, because I don't see a world where, he had 11.5 fantasy points per game. That's okay. That's cool and all, but it's just not something I want to target. Let's talk about the tight end because they have a new tight end. It's Hayden Hurst.
New tight end, yeah.
Hayden Hurst, in the last time he had this opportunity solo in Atlanta, he was fine and serviceable for tight end. Do you feel like he just plays the Uzama role and he doesn't really – we don't see a shift in the total targets, and which would mean a total shift in the opportunity? Or do you still see him as this, again, damn near free with maybe a serviceable game or two? Or are you buying into that Hayden Hurst is going to help unlock more out of Joe Burrow?
I think you could like insert me talking about tight ends across most of these teams, but the key is he's free. Go pick him up, because who knows? Like I said, if any of these wide receivers miss time, we saw last year that the running back and the tight end picked up that production, and that's where Uzama got a lot of those bigger games and became more relevant down the stretch. So with just the way that seasons go, the longevity of it, the season getting longer and longer, he's going to have some relevant games. If you can pick them, fantastic. But otherwise, he's just like that classic, tight end one upside on any given week where he gets a touchdown sort of deal. And if you can get him for free, that's great, because I don't want to pay up for a tight end.
No, that's fair. Look, I think that's it for the Cincinnati Bengals. Final thoughts on the Cincinnati Bengals and what you're expecting. Do you feel like they are going to return their ADPs and their values in 2022, or are you not willing to bet on that and you're willing to maybe move on a little bit?
Yeah, for me, I think, like I said before, so if you can acquire them in the offseason, I don't think I see any of them being busts per se, but I also don't see any of them breaking the scales as like a huge value pick. It's just you're kind of getting them because you know they are of value and worth something. The only one that sort of flagged for me is that if Joe Mixon starts dropping off from a production point of view, which I think this year is safe, but as we know with every running back, don't go paying running back 1-1 prices for a guy who we know is going to hit the age apex eventually and drop off. So next year, pretty safe, pretty good, like a Dalvin Cook was last year, but keep in the back of your head, you're probably not going to be able to resell this guy at any point in time after that.
Yeah, it's kind of your last hurrah. I agree. My stance, I feel like, is pretty how do I say this? I don't have a problem where anyone is being drafted on the Bengals, except for Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is closer to the back end of your first round in your dynasty startup than he is the beginning, period. As we mentioned, 34 passing touchdowns, all the yards, all the swag. He had a couple of the blow-up games that honestly crushed me in a couple of leagues because I played against the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack, and it was an auto-delete of my fantasy team. However, passing up the rushing upside of other quarterbacks on the board, to me, is silly. So I wouldn't suggest drafting Joe Burrow at 5 or 6. I would suggest drafting Joe Burrow at 8, 9, and 10, because I feel like that's going to benefit you. If you want Joe Burrow, trade down and just hope the person trading up doesn't draft Joe Burrow in that spot. And if that person does draft Joe Burrow in that spot, draft whatever player falls because they shouldn't have made it because they drafted Joe Burrow in that spot. I think that's a pretty easy breakdown right there. Look, we're going to get through one more, so hopefully we got about another 20 minutes left. When we come back from this little break, we're going to finish this off with the Cleveland Browns. And we do just have a small disclaimer about the whole Cleveland thing, as we mention every time the Browns are brought up, but we're going to go over that again. So sit tight. Here's Noah Hill's evisceration of Isaiah Spiller, I guess, and Jacob.
The big back roll in LA sucks. It's a bad roll. Like you're spinning a die, hoping for a touchdown so you can get 9 fantasy points. Otherwise, it's terrible.
I agree.
This is like I hate this. Like anyway.
I agree. That's why I wanted to point it out, though, because some things we were saying used to prop up Dameon Pierce, we use to kind of slight Spiller. So I just thought that was very interesting to me. Yeah, you want the pass catching role as the backup. Now, if Spiller does that, then he's a better handcuff. But the days of Isaiah Spiller being an absolute smash target in Dynasty, to me and almost everyone else, is dead, except for the people that have preconceived notions of what Isaiah Spiller is. Look, let's talk about the Cleveland Browns, because they traded away everything to go and get their idea of a franchise quarterback. And I just want to state, as we are talking about the Browns and what their potential is, we're not going to sit here and talk about the legalities of Desean Watson's scenario. We understand that it is a sensitive topic for some people. If that bothers you, you don't have to listen. It's not going to bother us if you need to take that time out. We want to respect that for you. We're here to talk about the football of it all and how that affects the rest of the team for your fantasy team. So again, if this is something that will trigger you, I suggest not tuning into this part, and we'll see you on the next episode. Come join us in the Discord. That's no problem. But for those who don't mind, we are going to talk about the Cleveland Browns and how that impacts the fantasy season. Obviously, with no draft picks to really speak of, we're going to talk about David Bell. They drafted in the 3rd round, a player that we liked. He dropped a little bit farther than we thought. Very productive player. Devy Sweetheart, potential wide receiver 1 for the last couple of years in the Devy, on the Devy streets. Did not happen, but top 100 pick, 3rd round, decent spot. But I think there's no way we can start talking about the Cleveland Browns without talking about their quarterback scenario, because Baker Mayfield is indeed dog shit, fit for the dog pound. He's sitting on the bench, and he may not even be with them at this point. So there's your savior. There's your favorite son, Cleveland. Enjoy those memories of the commercials. They only targeted the wide receivers 50% of the time. That's 253 targets, 104 running back targets, but they targeted the tight ends 28% of the time. 142 times they targeted the tight end. We like that. The number 1 receiver on this team was Jarvis Landry. No other real receivers to mention from last year. We are going to bring up Donovan Peoples-Jones because people still think he's going to be a thing. Obviously, the meat of this team is in the running game, and we did mention Dearness Johnson at the start of the show, but Tom Lee, what stood out to you when you started going through the numbers for the Cleveland Browns last year?
What stood out was just how hard it is going to be to predict what the hell happens with this team. Because, I mean, we could see the whole target share, the offense completely change around whether or not one player plays or not. Like you said, we're not going to go into the legality stuff, but this whole offense and its identity revolves around the running backs, which is great. But one of them may not be there next year, and that's why we were talking about Dearness Johnson. There's so many moving parts, except for that Nick Chubb's a year older, and he stands out across the board in his stat lines as that pure runner over and over and over again. The rest of it, man, like, we're going to have a bit of an interesting time wading our way through it, because what stood out was just how many moving pieces there's been. and how much I'm going to struggle to figure out what goes where when looking at these players, and especially drafting for redraft this year coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be something. That's for damn sure. But I think there's no better way than to just get into it.
Absolutely.
With the Cleveland Browns, they had 349 total points scored because their quarterback is dog shit. And yes, I'm going to get that in as many times as I can. Their overall grade was 8th. Their offense was tied for 13th. So if you're wondering what carried them, it was definitely their defense and their special teams, because their quarterback was absolute shit. And let's talk about that quarterback. He only threw the ball 418 times. That's 23rd. That's not great. 3,000 passing yards. Not great. 58 deep attempts. That's good. 48 oh my God, stop saying percent. Jesus Christ. 48 red zone attempts. Only 29 money throws. That's not big time. That's not big clutch. 21 danger plays. So that's not awful. That's 30th in the league. He's safe. That's for sure. Only 20 interceptable passes. I just want to point out that the Ravens dropped like 4 INTs in the second half of that really ridiculous game they played last season. They dropped like 4 picks. He was easily going to have 4 to 6 interceptions in Lamar Jackson's 4 interception game. So shout out to that game. It almost gave me a heart attack. It was really bad. It was brutal. Only had 17 passing touchdowns. That is abysmal, but he wasn't throwing to anyone. Matthew Stafford looked pretty good throwing to OBJ. I don't know. Maybe it was just my eyes. Maybe I need new glasses. I don't know. His EPA, he was plus 51. That's not good. That's 20th for anyone wondering. His true passing grade, not terrible at 84. That's good for 18th. We're going to give him the 14. It was 13.9. We'll give him the 14. 14 fantasy points per game. Only good for 26. That's not even a QB2. What's worse is his expected fantasy points per game. And you're like, oh, this and this happened. The scenario is expected's got to be better. Oh, it's better. Sort of. 14.47 was his expected fantasy points per game. That's 29th in the league. He went from 26th, right, playing under his expected, but his expected was 29th. He got worse if he would have hit better numbers in points per game if everyone had their expected. That's not good. That's really bad. His PFF passing grade, an abysmal, horrifically awful 62.4, not percent. And I know, the injuries. He was hurt. His left shoulder didn't stop him from not throwing the ball to the other team. I just want to point that out. And yeah, he went out there and he was a warrior, but he also cost them the game. The quarterback scenario, Tom Lee, is obviously, it's going to be different. Maybe Baker Mayfield plays. Maybe Desean Watson gets suspended for an entire season because it's kind of looking, the way it's looking. Yeah. Might be gone for an entire season. Even if it's 8 games, it's going to sink a lot of the fantasy options for this team. Here's the real question. They have Jacoby Brissett. I think Jacoby Brissett could easily put up the Baker Mayfield numbers you had from last year. I don't think that's outside of the realm of possibilities. I actually think that's likely. Does Deshaun Watson come in and regain the top 5 form playing for Cleveland if he plays every game?
If he plays every game, it's possible. I mean, one of the big things they did last offseason was try to improve their offensive line, and that's what gave us, I think, hope for Baker, and that's what made it even more disappointing when he wasn't fantastic. And it's almost most disappointing because he didn't really fire a shot. It wasn't like he went out there, took all these chances and was shit. He just missed basic plays over and over and over again and was shit. Like, it wasn't, Like, it wasn't this huge risk taker, gunslinger, big dick energy floating around his budgie smuggler sort of bloke, throwing and slinging and just going for it. It was just a feeble missing players, missing tight ends over the middle of the field. It was just awful to watch. So, it doesn't take much to say, like you said, for Jacoby Brissett, one, to run when he's under pressure, if that's the case, which is always what Jacoby can do, but also just to hit those passes. Like, they schemed a lot of open looks to these guys across the middle of the field, and time again, Baker couldn't hit them. So if you're a competent quarterback who actually can look a receiver and hit them on the chest, you're likely to replicate these numbers and be passable at best. So if it ends up being Jacoby or, I don't know, Case Keenum or whoever else is floating around, that's not Baker, or even if it is Baker, I think it's going to be very similar to what it was this year for however long Watson misses. I think the talent on the roster and the way that the roster could break down would give an opportunity to a Desean Watson athletic type quarterback to push for top 5, but I wouldn't say it's a lock by any means.
Yeah, I agree. I know a lot of people I know even Jacob are willing to put him right back to where he was. I don't know if I am. Obviously, the Hopkins stuff, and then he still even had Brandon Cooks, and I don't know. The situation also is they're a good defensive team that likes to run the ball, and I don't know how well that's going to play for them. And Desean Watson. I'm avoiding him. I don't want him on my rosters because you don't know what his future holds. So there is that. But I will say Desean Watson will prop up the receivers, whoever the receiver is, except for Amari Cooper, who we're going to talk about and who I wrote about. But before we get into the wide receivers, actually, we'll talk about the wide receivers first because there'd actually be less to talk about than the actual freaking running backs on this team. Jarvis Landry, not on the team. 85 targets last year. Odell Beckham Jr., I don't have his targets in front of me, but not on the team.
Not much.
Obviously, they trade I think a 5th or 6th round pick for Amari Cooper's ass. Obviously, Amari Cooper is a decent receiver, but I don't think there's much that he can do that Jarvis Landry can't. I think Amari Cooper is mid. You can hear my thoughts on Amari Cooper at goingfor2.com, where I write that he is the fantasy football middle child because he definitely is. 53% of the games he plays, he finishes as a wide receiver 3 or worse. That's really fucking bad. And you can't really all blame it on his quarterback play. He's had Carr and Dak, who at one point, Dak was creeping his way into that top 6, top 7 Joe Burrow territory in dynasty quarterbacks. And now all of a sudden he's getting swatted right back down. So David Bell, is definitely the receiver I feel like you want on this team. Peoples-Jones, maybe, sure, he can develop into a thing. Big body guy, 14% target share as a rookie isn't bad. 597 yards, big play guy, 3 touchdowns, 10.3 yards per target. That's pretty good considering how much of I'm not going to say the word I want to say, but a bitch Baker Mayfield was with the football. But he only had a 67 Pro Football Focus grade, so that's not great. However, David Bell is definitely a player I want because I think he can play Jarvis Landry's role. And Jarvis Landry, when he was the main target in Cleveland, was very good for fantasy. And when healthy, Jarvis Landry can be very good for fantasy. So the PPR slot receiver spam, which is where I think they will play David Bell at the next level, I think he'll be very good. But I think you're looking at a wide receiver 3 who limbos at wide receiver 2. Are you buying him at his high second round price? Obviously, we like David Bell. What's the outlook for David Bell and the rest of this really awful wide receiver core?
Yes, I like the second round price. The high second round, take your shot at this point because it's just after 109, pretty much pick the guy you like. But I'm seeing quite a few people get him at a value towards the back end of the second. So if you're getting him anywhere from sort of 205 onwards, I'm extremely happy with David Bell at that price. The key is if you're drafting him, he's not one of those quick flip guys that we've talked about when it comes to second round picks. You're not looking to get him, watch him produce, and then flip him off for higher value. You've got to let this year just let him develop into being a wide receiver and hope that the second year is where he starts to dominate. One, the quarterback inconsistency is going to be a nightmare. Learning a new system, and even if it's a changing system, for a young wide receiver coming in, it's going to be tough and difficult because creating that bond with the quarterback, if it's constantly flipping through all these different guys, is going to be a little tough. Also, where they play him, I'm not sure. I'd love to see him dominate on the outside, but they haven't been that team. So it's hard to then say, David Bell will go outside, Amari Cooper sits in the slot, or to the other side, whatever. It's hard to say this is how they're going to do it. Are they going to play with 2-3 tight ends again and try to hit those over the middle targets? If so, who's going to do it? I don't know. It's just like I said, it's really hard to predict what they want to do with the offense. So for me, I like the talent of Bell. I like the acquisition price. If he ends up playing with Desean Watson a hell of a lot, I like that as well. But what he's going to do in the first year does not fill me with excitement. So I'm buying him, put him on the taxi squad. I really like this guy and think he can be something special later. But you can't expect to flip him in year one like you would with the Christian Watson or something with a boom game and look to flip for an increased price.
Yep, 100%. I think you nailed that right on the head. I think as much as we love him and the Devy community loved him, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're taking a stab at the dark, and I think he's just as likely to do nothing as he is to be a contributing wide receiver too, because that's what Brandon Cooks is. I'm not saying David Bell is Brandon Cooks, but with Desean Watson, right, with being the only dog in town, because I don't trust Amari Cooper. I think that man, he's tough because I like him. I like him as a player. Let's move on here. That's the receivers.
Really
Obviously, you want to
takeaway.
Yeah. I think you're just waiting to see on the receivers and how it operates because, again, it runs through the running game and it's going to. However, there is a player who I think can be the receiver. It is the Cleveland Browns' leading receiver from last year. That's David Njoku, who had 53 targets last year for 36 receptions. Again, they're leading. They're leading. I can't really say leading receiver. It was Jarvis Landry, but I don't know where I got leading receiver. I'm so sorry. I misinformation over here. 475 yards. He had a 11.4% target share. That's good for 25th. 7 deep targets, though. We like that. 9 red zone targets. We like that.
Yeah.
4 total touchdowns. He had 6.7 fantasy points per game. It wasn't a great season for Njoku, but he did have a PFF grade of 70. However, fresh new contract, no receivers. I think the door is open for a big year for Njoku. I am buying David Njoku. I am buying into it finally being his show. Austin Hooper is gone. He is in Tennessee. Harrison Bryant's mid. And I think that David Njoku is either going to be Jacoby Brissett's number 1 target, Baker Mayfield's number 1 target, or Desean Watson is going to like him some David Njoku, possibly just a giant wide receiver for Desean Watson. Are you fading the mid-ish tight ends for David Njoku like I am? Are you in? Are you out? How do you feel it's going to be?
Well, yet again, we get to tight end, and here I sit. No, I actually quite like David Njoku. The issue was that I'm pretty sure we knew he was in the process of re-signing a deal, and we didn't go out and jump on him for a third. Because I think he's now going to cost you at least a second.
I think he is.
Because everyone's excited about it. Which is a bit of a shame because then we start to go, how much do you want to pay for a tight end? And I start talking myself out of it. But if you are going to go and pay a late second for a tight end, Njoku is one of those guys, so I'm very happy to take a shot on. I think talent, I think he's at the right age. I think the offense could crumble around him and he's still relevant because he still stands out as a target. And if there's going to be a tight end or a red zone opportunity, an end zone or a red zone opportunity, you're going to notice the giant guy wearing 85 who's massive and can take the ball at the top above everyone else. So, and he's got better hands than Evan Ingram. So if you liked Ingram in previous years, go and pay the same price for an Njoku because I think you're going to enjoy at least watching him more so than him dominating and becoming the tight end 1. I think he's going to be very serviceable and very usable if you're a guy like me who doesn't like paying for tight ends.
Nope, I agree. Nope, very good. And look, we're not guys that enjoy paying for mid-tier tight ends. It's just never going to be my thing. That was my big argument. But the running backs, Tom Lee, this is where it's really going to hit home. And I just want to shout out Wyatt from JYB. He had a tweet today about Nick Chubb. I just want to put, if Kareem Hunt gets traded or cut, it's easy to think Nick Chubb would see an increase in opportunity, but that's not how Stefanski handles Chubb. Innuendo inserted. Nick Chubb opportunities per game, rushing attempts plus targets in 2021 with Kareem Hunt active 18.3, with Kareem Hunt inactive 17.9. He's just, I don't think he'll ever just get the workhorse role that we all want and love. He is a top 10 running back in points per game every year, aside from his rookie year, which is also really important. Nick Chubb last year, 228 carries, 25 targets. You like that? 1,259 rushing yards. Obviously, amazing yards per carry. We don't really use yards per carry, but it's, just impressive to say. 5.5. Really good. Under 7% target share. We don't like that. Evaded tackles, 92. The man is just so hard to tackle. He had a 37.1% juke rate. Unbelievable. He did have 20 slot snaps. He did have 25 snaps out wide. Only 42 red zone touches. That is a little bit concerning. He had 15.4 fantasy points per game. Give Nick Chubb the football in the red zone. Good things are going to happen. But he did perform above expected. His expected was only 12.9 That would have been 21st. So big change. Obviously 80.6 PFF rushing grade. And of course, there's always he's the best pure runner in the game. 63 receiving grade, which actually isn't terrible given his opportunity, and overall grade of 81.7. He is a monster. Yeah. Before we get to Kareem Hunt, I just want to ask, is this just what you're going to get from Nick Chubb forever? Or until his wheels completely fall off? Is this it for him?
I think this is Nick Chubb. Like, he is awesome to watch, but at the same time, like, and you said, the red zone touches are the ones that stand out because it's double what Kareem Hunt had. But Kareem Hunt didn't play for half of the season. Like, it was, you'd get down there and you'd see Nick Chubb try to run it in once, and then for some reason they'd either score or stuff it. And I think it's indicative of what the Browns were. So if they can improve their composure, their ability to drive it all the way down the field and score and not just turn it over or fumble or Baker Mayfield the fuck out of the ball, I think he will get a little bit more production from a scoring point of view or more red zone opportunities. But otherwise, you're just going to watch him between the 20s just dominate teams over and over and over again, and it is fun to watch while you have him. It's just a shame that those boom, big-ass games probably going to start disappearing more and more as we see him age out of being a top running back.
No, I completely agree. And look, I was big when you could get Nick Chubb early, but you just can't really, or relatively priced, I should say, not early. Yeah. Sorry, my brain's wandering here, but relatively priced, like start of the second round, mid-second round. Now getting him there, no, I don't want that. He doesn't catch passes. He does rely on, some good fortune. I think he's a fine player. If you have him, you're holding on to him, you're trying to win a championship. I think he could definitely have a Derrick Henry type season still in him. The way they do run the ball, they will need to rely on him, especially early in the year if there are suspensions handed down. And their offensive line, although it did take a hit with Alex Mack retiring, big hit, but the offensive line is okay, and the defense is just good. They're going to play Browns football, and I think he's going to be a valuable asset. For me, the most interesting part of this backfield, because I think Nick Chubb is what he is. I don't think there's really anything. Chances are he can get worse. I don't know how much better he's going to get, and I think that's really important. However, Kareem Hunt is very interesting if he goes to a team that can give him any semblance of a starting role. Very good running back. 78 carries last year. He was hurt. But before he got hurt, top 10 running back. They had top 12, sorry. They had 2 RB1s. I know I was heartbroken when Kareem Hunt went down. I relied on Kareem Hunt a lot. He had 386 rushing yards, 174 receiving yards. He had 5 yards per carry. Again, very good. I mean, yards per carry is whatever it is, but that's still 10th. That's still very good. He had almost a 12% target share, which is what we want. He had 12 snaps on the outside, 14 snaps. That's 10% and 8.3% respectively for him. He had the 4th best juke rate, 36%. Again, he missed time, but whatever. But he missed as much time as he did, and he had only half of Nick Chubb's red zone touches. Nick Chubb should have definitely far outscored Kareem Hunt in red zone touches. Expected, or his, fantasy points per game. His expected, fantasy points per game was 11.1, and his expected fantasy points per game, did I seriously read that wrong?
This is what happens when it gets right down there. They're pretty
fantasy points per game, 13.8, and his expected fantasy points per game was 11.6. Very sorry, everyone. Either way, that difference, 15.4 for Nick Chubb and 13.8 for Kareem Hunt. It's really hard to say go and get Nick Chubb over Kareem Hunt if Kareem Hunt's on the Browns. It's very hard for me to say that. I think it's Kareem Hunt is a buy, and he is just always a buy because he's always relatively cheap. He's definitely priced way below what his production is. You're not having to trade a first for him. I would trade a late second. I might even trade a mid-second for a guy like Kareem Hunt. If he goes to another team, I think they're going to at least use him the same way. And he's a great pass catcher. So even if there is another back, if that other back gets hurt, you want running backs from ambiguous backfields, but you want the guys that can catch passes and have the opportunity to do both. Kareem Hunt is that guy. Is there a place, if it's not Cleveland for you, that Kareem Hunt automatically has like a Leonard Fournette type late rejuvenation in his 20s.
Off the top of my head, I mean, like, obviously your Atlantas and that sort of stuff still sit out there, right? It's completely pointless for them to go and get one, but if he ends up landing somewhere like that, like you said, you're excited. But the other appeal, even within Cleveland, so let's just say he stays. The great irony of this backfield is that if Kareem Hunt misses time, Nick Chubb's production doesn't necessarily go up. If Nick Chubb misses time, Kareem Hunt's production does go up, which is interesting. So he is the upside player and he's the cheaper player, and that's why you're talking so much about him being a buy, is because he already has the receiving stuff set, plus he gets added touches. So it's hard to see where he would go if not, but it's the NFL, man. We know this. We've seen it year on year. You can go anywhere, and this guy's still young and talented enough to go and make it as the runner as well as the pass catcher. I think the two stats that stood out the most when you're reading them off, and it's the two that Chubb and Hunt are back-to-back in, and that's juke rate and it's yards created with the touch. They're both 5th and 6th in yards created and then 3rd and 4th in juke rate. So these guys both have juice between the 20s. They can get it done. If he's affordable and he goes to a team that uses him, he's still a fantastic asset to acquire in Dynasty because we know that receiving upside's there as well. Yes.
Everything you said was bang on. It was absolutely spot on. Kareem Hunt is still a glaring buy on this team. And if it's Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and Dearness Johnson, I don't care about Dearness Johnson. It's a 1-year contract for a guy who is lucky to be on the team, right? He worked hard and he looked good in his opportunities, sure. But if Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are there, you're obviously Dearness Johnson's only netting a couple of touches per game. For sure, he's there for insurance, and I definitely believe that. So I think what's interesting when we look at the Cleveland Browns and what we just walked through, I think it's Kareem Hunt and David Njoku are the real glaring buys on this team, and David Bell you're kind of buying at cost. Desean Watson's cost is too rich for me early in the second round, even sometimes in the first round. Way too rich for me. Nick Chubb in the second to third round is too rich for me. And Amari Cooper is not someone I ever want on my team at any time, ever, because, again, Amari Cooper has finished as a wide receiver 3 or worse over 50%. I think it's over 53% of the games he's played. You don't want that on your team at all. That's the Cleveland Browns. Do you have any final thoughts on the Cleveland Browns before we get out of here?
No, just to keep an eye on the whole situation. Look at Hunt, and I know as much as it's annoying, keep your eyes across all the Watson news. The whole team is just up and down. But like you said, the pieces that we know will be there are the buys, and they're affordable, so why not go and grab them? Because I think if everything falls the right way, the upside's still well worth the cost. If it doesn't, then you haven't lost out on anything because it's the Njokus, the Bells, and even the Hunts are still good floor pieces with great opportunity. So, keep an eye on the whole offense as a thing. It's the reason we kind of did it early because I got a feeling we're going to come back and readdress it at some point. But yeah, for now, she's a bit of a clusterfuck. But otherwise, she's buying, yeah.
I think the Cleveland Browns are going to be one of those teams that annoy their fantasy owners more often than they don't. I think they're a team that can score 19 points per game, but still somehow end up winning 12 games because of the rest of the way their roster is. All they need is above average quarterback play. Jacoby Brissett, or a pissed off Baker might do it. I don't know. Maybe he'll wake up and feel dangerous, shave the mustache back in, and get his value back on. I don't know how that's going to turn out. Or Deshaun Watson starts from week 1 and he's not rusty and they win 15 games just to send me yeeting into the sun because I don't think I could mentally handle that. Other than that, the Cleveland Browns, like we said, Kareem Hunt, he's a buy. David Njoku, I've argued and lobbied for him for a while. And David Bell, you're buying at cost. And I think that's it. That's the AFC North. We have done the Ravens. We have done the Browns, the Bengals, and the Steelers. We're going to be back with the NFC North next week. We're going to play with the format, kind of feel this out, and we're going to keep going through this process because I'm learning something new every episode. And I think it's important to look at what happened next year and really take this time to apply what's likely to happen next year. And of course, as we get more news and we move to the offseason through OTAs, and then we're going to get to actual mini camp and then all that other fun stuff, and more info is going to come out, and it'll really help shape these conversations and what might happen. Look, Tom Lee, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. We haven't had Aussie slang in a while, and I don't know if you guys will go and know this one. But for me this week, it's Spit the Dummy. You heard of Spit the Dummy, Tom?
I've not heard Spit the Dummy.
So Spit the Dummy essentially just means to blow up or throw a tantrum. Dummy is what we call pacifiers over here. So your babies are sucking on a dummy, they spit it, and it's the same as sort of spitting chips, blowing up. But Spit the Dummy is to have a bit of a tanty, have a bit of a blow up, and lose your shit and walk out. So it's a bit of a storm off little one. So as you go along, feel free to insert Spit the Dummy into your daily lives.
Look, I love that. And I try to incorporate as many of these as I can into everyday conversation. I think it's important to expand and have fun with the English language, because if other people are butchering it, you can butcher it too. And we will continue to do that. And look, you might find more Aussie specific content in the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast Discord, which for the third time we're going to reference because I'm really hammering this thing home. It's really important to us, and I think it's going to be big for the show and the content that we can produce, and it can lead to some really great things. For me, obviously, like I said, we have JJ Zachariason coming in on Tuesday, and I am preparing for that show as we speak. I'm nervous as all hell. We have hopefully everything ready to go and kicked off for that. I can't believe what we have coming up. I'm really excited to be a part of the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. We're excited to be with Triple Play. We're excited to be with True North. Everything about this brand, everything about this show, I care so much about. It is my focus. It is everything. And that fact that we've passed 16,000 downloads, 16,000 times people have downloaded this show and listened to us spit our bullshit into these microphones. And man, it helped us get through the lockdown, and it's helping us every day. And hopefully you're learning something too and tagging along and having a great time. I'm very thankful to be able to do this, but I'm also more thankful to be able to create more content and help develop this process. So the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast Discord is going to be available. We're going to put out new information. You're going to get new stuff. And we want to thank everybody because we couldn't be here without you. So that's my final thought. And as I always like to say, don't be a giant piece of shit on the internet. Take care of one another. Check in on your loved ones. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose. Your best days, well, goddamn, they're always spent tilted. Good night, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.